Livonia. I'm Mr. Whittle. I'm the principal of the elementary school, and we're standing socially distanced, so I can take my mask off for right now to talk to you for a little bit. With me is Dr. McMahon.
Hi everybody, I'm the Director of Learning. Nice to see you.
And we're here in Mrs. Dory's room, and we're going to be talking to you a little bit about the choices you have for this school year. And right now we have a choice for all families to choose between in-person, what we're calling the one-room schoolhouse model of learning, and the digital learning 2.0. And we're calling it the one-room schoolhouse and digital learning 2.0 because no matter which choice you choose, it's going to be a little bit different than last year. The in-person will be different than our traditional way of running schools during the school year, and the digital learning is going to be different than how we approach digital learning during the springtime when we had very little time for preparation. We've now put a lot of different thoughts into it, and we're going to be running the digital learning in a very different way. So that's what we're here to talk to you about today. So what should families expect? When we talk about the digital option first, we're going to look at digital option 2.0. What should families expect? Well, the first thing, Dr. McMahon, is it's going to be live learning. What is that going to look like?
Yeah, it's going to be different than when we were remote learning in an emergency situation. So live learning means that students will be following a school schedule. So just like the students that are in school, the students that are home are going to be following our school schedule.
And in a few minutes, Dr. McMahon is going to be able to take you through what a schedule might look like and what it would be for you at home to work from in a digital model. One of the things that the state's been very clear of is that we have to take full attendance, and daily attendance in the digital model is going to be tracked at the same level as daily attendance would be in an in-school setting starting in September when we start the school year. And also, it'll be just like in a normal class where there'll be grading and feedback on the work, and assignments will have due dates and time to be turned in, and all of that will be a little bit more strictly followed than we did in the spring when we knew everybody was planning at the last minute and trying to make the best out of a tough situation. So we're going to try and follow as close as possible the time blocks of a typical school day. And we're going to walk you through the schedule in just a minute, and we'll get a clearer picture of what that might look like. And the last thing you can expect from us is that we really want to make sure that in this opportunity we take a chance every 2 weeks for a teacher to reach directly out to families and let them know how things are going, what assignments are still due for their child, and make sure that we have a different tool for communication with families so families have an easy idea of what they need to work with their child to make sure they accomplish. And there will also be some different expectations. Well, what do we need from you families? If you choose this option, there are some things that we really need to count on you to provide for us. And first would be that daily attendance from 8:30 to 3:15. Now, they're not necessarily going to be staring at a computer screen for 7 hours, is that right?
Absolutely. So we understand that screen time is something that we are really concerned about. And so we want to make sure that this is an experience where students have opportunities to use materials, to have some time where the teacher is directly teaching them maybe through Zoom or Google Classroom, but then also that students have time to do that work, Mr. Whittle.
So we're also looking for you to set up a learning area in your household. If you choose this environment, I know in the spring people were, in their bedrooms on a pillow with the Chromebook laying down, but we really want this to feel like a traditional school environment. So we're looking for you to set up at a table, to set up at a desk, something that will give the indication that you're ready to learn and that you have all the materials you need right there at your disposal for your child to be successful in the classroom environment. And the last thing is lunches. Obviously, you won't be in the school environment, you'll be in your home, or perhaps you're in a daycare provider and you'll be working with that person to ensure that your child has all the tools needed to connect in with the school. But when you're in that setting, you'll have to make a plan for lunch. If you want, you can come to school and we'll have a setup here on campus for you to purchase or get a lunch if you have free and reduced lunch. Through the school, there'll be a drop-off and pick-up area where you can grab your lunch if you would like to participate in the school lunch program. So this is what a schedule might look like. This is not going to be exact because obviously every teacher and every grade level might have different variances, and so this is a general schedule. You're not quite going to see as long a blocks for our younger learners as for our older learners, but this is a good idea. So what are we looking at when we look at this type of a day?
So we're going to probably start the morning with some sort of a classroom welcome, like a morning meeting, just like we do in a regular classroom. So that would be with the whole class the teacher would be welcoming them and kind of getting our day started. And then we have an ELA block. Again, the same expectation that we have in a regular classroom, but within this ELA block will be our reading and writing, as well as any of the other pieces that fit into our literacy program. Then we definitely want to build in movement breaks. So there'll be opportunities throughout the day for students to have those movement breaks. So again, they're not going to be sitting in front of a screen all day long. And then we really believe in the importance of independent reading. So that's going to be built into the day with an opportunity for teachers to confer with students one-on-one. So we'll be using our Zoom platform that has breakout rooms so that students can then work with their teacher during that time. Then we have math lessons. As you can see, time for lunch and recess. Again, that's going to need to be supervised by the families, Mr. Whittles, because we can't have recess in the school, right? And then time for science and social studies. Again, our plan is to send home materials so that students will have access to all of the great things that they would normally have access to in school.
So when we look at something like a block of time for a science lesson, there might be a part that is a direct instruction for the teacher setting up the lesson and helping everybody understand, but then the child may have materials that were sent home from the school so that they can actually perform the science experiment there at home that the teacher sets up at the beginning of the lesson.
Exactly.
And then at the end of the day, we will have our specials. So that some of them will be live, some of them may be asynchronous, meaning there'll be pre-recorded lessons that the students can work through. And so they'll be able to participate in all the same coursework as what we're doing here in the school environment. So in-person is also going to look different. I know for some people it is, let's just get our kids back to school and have everything be normal, but it's still not normal. We're still in the middle of the pandemic, and the state has given us very specific guidelines that we have to follow in order to ensure that everybody is safe here in the school community, as safe as we can possibly make it. The biggest thing we're doing is creating those small class sizes. By having those small cohorts, by using our math, reading, and special ed teachers to divide kids into the smallest groupings possible, that's the biggest thing we're doing for safety, is to make sure that there's less exposure. We're not going to have the switching between groups. The math and reading groups that we normally have, which were really successful and really worked well for us, just can't happen in the pandemic environment, because then you're mixing kids between different cohorts. The more we can keep everybody separate, the less exposure there is to different people, the safer we are in this sort of pandemic environment that we're currently in. But no matter what option we choose, we're going to maintain a perspective of digital learning. So even if you're in person, we're going to have Chromebooks for every child in the school system. And that's really important, because if we have blended learning, what are we setting ourselves up for?
So we want to make sure that students know exactly what to do in the Chromebooks, and they know exactly what to do in our digital platform. So in case we need to close school shortly for a short period of time, that everybody's ready to go. So that's our goal, is that we're going to have this blended environment. Also, Mr. Whittle, when you see some of the way that the classrooms are arranged, we want to make sure that every student can see their screen, because the way we've arranged some of the classrooms, you might not be able to see the smartboard directly.
And because we're in the middle of a pandemic, it's really important that children not come to school sick. So if a child had to stay home for a day, but having the blended learning allows that child to still connect in for the learning, even if they have to stay home, to make sure the rest of the school classroom community, that cohort community, can stay safe and not be exposed to those germs. Masks have to be worn for our students when they're not at their desk. And we're going to go through a little bit. Mrs. Dory's going to walk us through a little bit of her classroom. She was one of our summer school teachers, so we used her room as one of the first rooms that we mocked up for what the rooms would look like with the barriers and separation of 6 feet that are required by the state guidelines. So in a few minutes, we're going to actually show you a little bit of what that looks like, and she's going to walk you through some of the things she's thought of as a classroom teacher that all of our classroom teachers are thinking of in their minds. So the classrooms may not all look identical to Mrs. Dory's, but it'll give you an idea of what a classroom might look like. But we need students to be wearing the mask anytime they're not at their desk. Why do we say their desk? Because everybody's desk is going to be an area that is designed to be either separated by a barrier or separated by 6 feet, therefore meeting the definition of a safe space to be able to remove the mask. It's going to be important that we be able to remove the mask, because there are going to be times like when they're eating and times when kids just need a break. We don't want them wearing a mask necessarily for 7 hours a day. But it's also going to be important that they put those masks back on when they're moving about the room and going to different locations in the room and using different learning stations within the room. We're going to really build in a lot of outdoor time. We know that one of the greatest things for kids is to get outside, and we know that it's one of the safest things in the COVID environment, so it's a great way to pull that together and make sure things like PE classes are outdoors as much as possible, so that way when they're running around and breathing heavily, it's in the outdoor environment where that can dissipate into the fresh air. Lunches will be in the classroom. Right now, we don't have the space in our cafeteria, we don't have the ability to clean that large of an area that quickly, so we'll be doing lunches in the classroom. Number one, it'll keep us from moving throughout the building and keep the cohorts separated even more. And it also allows us to use the cafeteria area for our music classes, which will need to be able to have more space. And you're going to see a much more structured day. From arrival to dismissal, we're thinking through every minute of the school day and saying, how can we make sure that we eliminate congestion? Not having all the kids arrive at the same time and go in through the same door, not having everybody crowd onto a bus and sit through to a seat. We're going through the entire school day and saying, how can we make sure at all times that kids are as spread out as possible, and how we make sure that they're limiting that exposure to each other and to common materials where kids would be touching the same items.
I even saw that you had arrows on the floor in the hallway. So.
We actually have arrows on the floor. They're spaced out 6 feet so that when one child stops in the hallway from behind another child, they know where they can stop and remain 6 feet apart. So what do we need from families? The biggest thing we need is, it's really critical, more than any other year. We've always asked you not to send your children to school sick, but this year it really takes on obviously takes on a much more serious significance to make sure that we never send children to school when they are showing any of the signs of COVID. It is really critical. So every day we're going to ask for parents to verify that their child is healthy. They don't have a fever over 100, they haven't been exposed to somebody who was tested positive for COVID. All of those things that are the common sense guidelines, they're not showing a cough, they're not showing those things that are symptoms of COVID. Because we'll be blended learning, the child can still participate in the classes from home through those through the blended learning and using their digital materials. But we're going to ask that we not send kids into the environment until they are fully ready for learning in a healthy way. So we're going to ask keep them home, and that means it's going to be really important this year that you have a backup plan if your child can't come to school. It could be because your child is feeling sick themselves, or it could be because if there were an incident where a child were to have COVID, we would have that entire cohort at some point in time might be asked to stay home to quarantine, just to be absolutely sure that we are not allowing any spread of COVID within our school community. So it's really going to be critical this year that you have a backup plan. We got to think of any day might be just like we would have on a snow day, where any day might be a day when you need to have last minute plans for your child to have a safe space to go to if they're not able to participate in the school environment for any reason. One of the other things that we've been asked is to make sure that we limit parent access or any volunteer access to the school building. Again, the safest way we can keep from having children be exposed to different germs is just to really limit the numbers of people that they are exposed to. So we're doing that by small class sizes. We're also doing that by really sincerely limiting the amount of outside exposure of people coming into the building. So one of the things that might affect is that student pickup is going to happen by having you wait in the car. You'll check in with a staff member. They'll send you to an assigned numbered parking spot, and then your child will be brought out to you to your car, so that way we can avoid having all the parents in one small area confined space at the end of the day or at the end of a pre-K pickup or one of those times.
That even sounds better, like in the winter. I would much rather do that.
In some ways, you actually get to sit in your car, right? Just stay nice and warm, or maybe in the air conditioning, cool. So Mrs. Dory was in here for summer school, and so she had a chance to start being one of the classrooms that we used as a model for how we might space kids out and how it might look like. Because one of the first things I thought of as a dad is what do I want my kid to look and feel like? I know there's all these rules and regulations and guidelines, but what do I want that day to feel like? And so we worked on a whole bunch of different models, and here's one of the models we came down with, and Mrs. Dory is going to kind of walk us through what does a classroom feel like in a COVID environment.
Hi boys and girls, it's Mrs. Dory, and this is my classroom. I've decided to go with the barriers instead of the 6 feet apart because I wanted to have this open space for all the kids to work on the floor, on the counters, wherever we want to work. But this is one of the barrier markups, and we like to call it our office. So once you get in your office, you're all here, you can take off your masks because we have a barrier between us. And how are you able to see the board?
I see it perfectly.
Yeah, we did.
And one of the great things, Mrs. Dory, is not only will kids be able to see the board directly through the plastic, but since they will have their Chromebook here at their desk, what is being presented at the board will also be presented on their Chromebook, so that way they have 2 places they can look. If they don't want to look through the plastic, they can look right down at their Chromebook. And there's also other places, if they're watching the teacher, that they could move to. They would just have to put their mask back on.
Right, like right now, if I don't want to work in my office anymore, I could choose to sit on the floor. There's a back standing table. I also have some tables that kids might put on the floor, put their Chromebook here, work there. These also might go outside for when we're learning outside. We are going to try to get outside as much as possible. So these are our markups.
So there's just a couple other considerations we wanted to share with you, just so you know a little bit of what to expect during the school year. So the students are going to wear their mask not only when they leave their desk in the classroom, but they also have it on anytime they're out of the safe space of their desk in their cohort community. So in the buses, in the hallways, and they're going to be expected to wear their mask. We'll have music, band, and chorus in the cafeteria. Since we can't do lunches in there, it was a great way to spread things out and allow the distance that is needed to safely sing and do all the fun things that we would normally do in a music class or in a band or a chorus. For the band and chorus, our group sizes will be made smaller, so we won't have our full band and chorus because we would not allow us to spread out enough. But to meet the guidelines for doing that safely, we're going to make sure that we shrink those groups and have smaller groups. But we'll still be able to have the opportunity for our school year. And then we'll have lots of outdoor time, as Mrs. Dory talked about. The more we can get outdoors on those beautiful days, the better. We do have a plan for PE where they can spread out and have the space necessary in the gyms for the days when it's raining. But as much as possible, we're really going to try and get kids outside. We're also going to do a lot more frequent cleaning of the entire building, and especially those high contact areas. Any area that we know is going to get touched throughout the day that might be a source of having multiple kids touch the item that's going to be cleaned constantly throughout the day. We're going to make sure that kids are mostly working with their own individual supplies. So if we're doing a lesson with math manipulatives, every kid's going to get a bag with their own supplies instead of what we might have done where everybody grabbed from a common source of materials. And we're really not going to allow sharing of materials unless they're cleaned or if they're quarantined. The guidance that we get receiving from the state and from the CDC says that if an item has been untouched for a length of time, that the longer that is, the less risk there is for having any sort of contraction of COVID through shared materials. So we're going to be extra cautious on that and make sure that we aren't sharing any materials between students during the day. And the last thing is, many of you may be thinking, my child has an IEP, my child has a 504, and I have this under the in-person learning, but the same is true for under the digital learning. Any considerations that are in your IEP, in your 504, we are already looking at those very closely to say, how can we make sure we are meeting those expectations, because we want that full level of support for your child, whether they're digital or if they're in person. It's really important to us that we respect those IEPs. We put a lot of thought into making them, working with you as a family. We want to make sure that those are respected. So up here, I'll leave up our contact information. if you want to talk to me about any of the questions as principal, Dr. McMahon can certainly help you with any questions from the learning standpoint or questions on the digital learning we're working on. And Mrs. McGarry can help you. She's our coordinator of ES Student Services. If you have any questions about your child's specific needs from IEPs or 504s. We hope you make the best choice. If you have any further questions, we couldn't cover every bit of detail. We have a lot of thought going into all the minor details of the entire school day. Please just reach out to any one of us and we'd be happy to answer any questions so you can make the best choice for your family. We are asking that all families commit to a choice for at least 5 weeks at the beginning of the school year, just because it will be very difficult to switch kids from digital learning to the in-person learning. We'll have to make sure there's a safe desk set up and that there's separations and barriers put up. So it wouldn't be an overnight decision. We want you to make a commitment to at least the first 5 weeks with the decision you make. So if I can be of any help in helping you answer your questions so that you can make the best choice for your family, I'd love the opportunity to do so. Thank you so much. It's good to see everybody, and we'll see you soon back in school.